You're listening to the Racking Focus Podcast.
Welcome back to the Racking Focus Podcast. I'm Josiah Blizzard.
And I'm John Doyle, and we're here at the Regal Cinema in Oaks, Pennsylvania to see John Wick 3.
Very excited about this movie. He's killed so many people in the first two episodes of this trilogy, and I'm very excited to see the third one and see maybe the body count that is going to rack up here. But we're going to go see the film in the theaters, come back out, and give you our first take in one of these cars over here, and it's going to be a good time.
All right, so why don't we head into the theater?
Perfect. Let's go.
All right, there we go. All right.
What wild... So I love this intro. This whole first... It felt nonstop from the beginning of the movie, and I didn't know if it was ever going to end.
Yeah.
And then it ended. But I really thought this whole movie was going to be...
So we got to say first, spoilers. Spoilers. There's
Yes.
no way we can talk about this film without just vomiting the spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, you have to
Just
stop.
leave
Go
right
watch
now.
the movie.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, really thought it was just gonna be a nonstop action piece from beginning to end, based on how they started this film. Do you agree with that?
I was dumbfounded at the place we started.
Yeah.
And how long it took for us to stop being
To slow
there.
down. Yeah. There's I think my favorite scene in the entire movie, hands down, was that knife sequence at the beginning of the film, just because it was so, I don't know, I've never seen an action film where they're just chucking knives at each other nonstop, and the comedy behind that was really funny, but also, like, the action was ridiculous in that scene. Ridiculous. The camera work was amazing. The stunt choreography was amazing. Just hands down, everything in that fight scene was incredible to me. You were going to say something. Go for it.
I was just going to say that the idea of doing it in like a museum gave this difficulty for what a movie that's all about modern weaponry, right?
Right.
And so we see old guns, and then we see just smashing glass, which plays out nicely at the end too.
Right.
And all those knives, and it was spectacular.
There's something to be said about an action movie that trains their main actor as a stuntman versus hiring an actor and then hiring stuntmen to back that actor.
Right, exactly.
Because throughout the film, and even with Halle Berry's role, who I thought was going to be in this movie far more than she was. I thought she was going to have way more screen time. I imagine they set her up as somebody who is going to be in this fourth film, which I imagine has to come out now based off of how they ended this.
Yeah, there's no way there's not a fourth film.
There's a fourth film, without doubt. What was I saying? It was about...
Halle Berry's small role.
Yes. Yes, and about the actors being stuntmen and not just actors. There was never a moment where I was like, this is choreographed. This felt throughout the entire piece like they were responding to what was being thrown at them in real time. Like, you attack me and this is how I respond. There was no choreographed nature to it. It just felt so fluid. And I loved that. In the first part of this film, up until they slowed down, I was like, this could end up being the best action movie I've ever seen. And then it really slowed down, and there was moments where I kind of lost it, and it was dull for me in some parts, and then it ramped back up real quick. But yeah, there's a lot.
So from a fight choreography standpoint, there's a guy who the knife fight with the two last two henchmen.
Yes, the two Asian guys.
Yeah. So one of those guys is from this movie called The Raid, or The Raid Redemption. You can see it in America as Raid Redemption. Yeah. And he's called Mad Dog in that. And he is in one of the greatest fights I've ever seen on the screen. And it was super exciting to watch him fight. And I loved the way that fight proceeded. It was a piece of choreography. That was obviously a piece of choreography
in The Raid.
In John Wick. Yeah. But it flowed the whole time because it had character driving it.
Yes.
Which I thought was really interesting in a movie where Keanu Reeves is not known for his characterization, nor is this. I mean, he is not particularly the most detailed character here in the film, but there was stuff happening between these people that was interesting. Aside from the fact they were swatting each other around.
Yeah, there was a lot of character behind it, and specifically, it was weird with all of the Asian characters. Yeah, the car's on. It was turn the car.
Good.
With all of the Asian characters, specifically, we're almost starstruck with John Wick, which gave them a lot of personality. Even the villain of the film, who was the bald Asian guy, who I don't necessarily want to classify as the villain of the film. I feel like the High Table is the overarching villain of the series. And this guy never really he didn't really feel like a villain. He felt like a fanboy who really wanted money. And so he went after John Wick in a way only to meet him and fight with him. And they were all saying it's an honor to fight next to you. And I loved the exchange between those two of the Asian henchmen and John. Just I can get up myself.
Right.
Let's go again. Yeah, it was felt like a sparring match between old friends, but they've never met. It was really great.
Yeah, I felt like at the beginning they really made an effort to pull away from guns, right? I talked about I was going to count the bullets, and by the end of that first sequence, I'd only gotten to 8.
I know,
was like, what's going on? But in fact, that was so much of that was about holding back and changing the pace and doing something different so we could.
I completely lost count with the kill count. I think I was like, all right, we hit 15. I think. I don't know. I just stopped counting because it was implausible to even guess that many. But so I think the big things in this film that stood out to me: fight choreography. Obviously, we've talked about a little bit already. Cinematography. And oddly enough, the production design.
No, agree with you completely on production
design.
Absolutely.
And I didn't really pick this up in the other two films, but the production design is astounding. Walking into Winston's vault safe house room, panic room, and just seeing the detail in the walls and in the old guns versus the new weapons, and his couch, and down to I think there was whiskey or something on his table. I loved that entire. And that's just one piece. You have all of Casablanca, and the entire Continental in general. But just blown away by the amount of detail that they're putting into this. It's an action movie. You didn't think they'd put that much work into it, but they did. So that little sequence, that little room, really stuck out to me more than anything else.
It feels so much like this is a fantasy film. Like when you watch it, it feels like it's some big epic fantasy.
Right.
And so all those details are things that matter because they're creating lore.
Right.
When it doesn't feel like a first-person shooter game, right? When it doesn't feel like you're watching a third-person, first-person shooter game.
Right.
You're realizing in the background there's all this detail, and it's weapon detail, right? But it's also period detail. Mm-hmm. So we go into worlds, and when we're in there, there's tons of rich, interesting things to look at.
In fact, the museum you talked about in the beginning, right? That knife fight was in the museum, and but even in there's a throwaway shot where they're chasing him through an alley of chandeliers. I'm like, do you know how long it took to set up that one shot with all the chandeliers in there? And this kind of transitions a little bit into lighting, but I noticed a lot of practical source lighting. They didn't have giant mounted 5Ks, right, sitting in the corner. It felt like every light in the room was set up to be a practical light source for the film itself, and you saw that a lot in the end sequence where they're flipping the lights on with the switch, and I don't know the guy's name. He's the concierge, and he turns the switch off, and
is of course some ancient big switch,
some giant
coming out of this gorgeous wall that's in this modern environment.
Oh, it was amazing, and it goes dark, and then it pops up with the green LED strips that are kind of flashing.
Yeah, like malfunctioning LED strips.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It was just incredible the way they went about lighting this.
Yeah, I think lighting is the thing I wanted to actually talk about, and we'll see how I feel in a day or two. But everything's about where the source is coming from.
Right.
So we get these almost useless flashbang smoke grenades that are there so that we can see light beams and source lighting, and the light, and everything has a haze, right? Mm-hmm. So we're seeing the shapes of the beams and all of that. Yeah. And then when we go to a shot, we're also seeing especially because there's so much use of depth, which I was really surprised about. We see grain in all that depth, and that's part of the light too, right?
Yeah.
And so light source and this diffusion of light, this hazing of light, really interesting.
Yeah, it was a nice way for us to maybe not see a villain coming. There was a lot in the movie where a bad guy, a henchman, it pops out of the shadows or out of the smoke, and John Wick kind of takes on his Baba Yaga character towards the end, where he's fighting his equal almost.
Right.
And you feel for him because he's like, how the heck is this guy moving so fast? And then John Wick starts to do that same sort of thing, shifting into the shadows, disappearing, and playing the game, and becoming who they've said he was since the beginning. I've never felt like he was the boogeyman,
right?
Until this movie, and he does whatever it takes to survive, to get back, and ultimately win his war for now.
Right.
Anyway, for now.
Well, at least, or set up the war.
Up the war.
We learn Parabellums, prepare for war,
right.
And that means, as we get that translation, you're like, okay, so this is actually 3 of 4. Like, we're gonna have a 4th film because war has to be.
This
the next
was like
movie.
A prequel. The 3 movies were very much a prequel to potentially the next trilogy. Right. I don't know if they're gonna be able to stop at 4. I think the movies are doing so well. Like, are they going to just milk it? And hopefully it doesn't turn into this poor, sad, they ruin it, Game of Thrones. Some movie 8 where they just tank it.
Speaking of that, the first gunshots are during the scene where Game of Thrones Bronn appears as the guy who makes the coins, right? So we're going deep into the mythology of this world they're in.
There's been a lot of Game of Thrones actors in this series. You have Alfie Allen in the first movie, along with Ian McShane. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the all 3 of them, and then you get Jerome Flynn in the third, who doesn't sound a lick like Bronn, except for some words.
No, right, exactly.
There's a few words that he just does not do the accent right, but it's. I feel like he wanted to just be Bronn in this movie, but he couldn't, because if he does it, he's slated as Bronn for the rest of his life. Yeah. But you brought up culture. And seeing the behind the scenes of the people who make the coins and the people who make the markers, I never thought about that even being a thing. There's somebody who forges these coins, and I think, and this is partially going back to the production design, every piece of production design, wherever they go in the assassin realm, the hitman world, is just pointing out a piece of culture from this, I don't know, some hidden secret underworld of assassins.
The mythos of it really grew this time through, and we got the anchoring. I actually thought about those coins. It was that moment early in the film where he has his last couple of coins, and I said to myself, where the hell are they getting these things? If these are all people who kill folks,
right?
Who is making all this? Are there these plebes they have working under them? And it turns out the plebes are killers too, but they are working under them. And it was pretty. That was actually
it was great. It was great to go there and see them. And I was like, this is where they're made, because they're starting to pour this, and I'm like, this is very strange. It was great to see that in just all the detail and I never really picked up on it in the last 2 movies, but the production design really pushes the culture of this assassin world from Italy, right, and John Wick 2, and I think we were just in New York in the first movie, but it's interesting because I always felt like there were just killers everywhere at all times, and they've set up John Wick to be this legend, and so everybody, of course, recognizes John Wick, and for him to, it'd be like an A-list celebrity today, coming out as or being on a hit list. Everyone's gonna know who Brad Pitt is when he walks by. That's to them, that's their Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
So.
I one of the things I'll say, so like a negative about that I just have to at least address is there are moments when I felt like the camera movement reminded me of like a 1980s television show.
Okay, yeah.
And so we have this gorgeous production design and this phenomenal choreography and a driving action sequence from beginning to end. And I'll say something about that later too that's stuck in my head. But there were a few moments where it felt like there's a helicopter shot and it's sort of panning around a building and I'm like, this is just Die Hard. And so for all of the detail work in the fights, some of that big scope stuff is where the movies aren't as strong. Yeah. Because I think that's not where the talent of this crew is.
It felt like maybe you're feeling like they're just creating images for emotional sake, in the sense of they just want to Michael Bay it in a way, they just want to bring it up a notch and make you feel like it's larger than it actually is, when in actuality we need to stay on the ground level with these characters. The biggest shots for me, the best shots, were the wide shots of, and not like super wide, but the wider shots of us just beneath John or the characters he's fighting,
exactly.
and they're just going for it, like just fighting each other, and that's how you know it's good stunt choreography, when you don't cut away, even not just the hand-to-hand combat, but the gunfight. I think we see Halle Berry's character come out, and we focus on her for a substantial amount of time. Yep. And that's when she left John in the desert. I was like, "What? We're done with her for this movie," which felt really weird after getting that really heavy focus on her for, I don't know, it was like 2 minutes. It felt like which is a substantial amount of time in a gunfight. And she's just mowing down people left and right. So she's obviously trained in the same way Keanu trained at this ranch, wherever he trained at.
Yeah,
right. Pretty impressive. You mentioned a chase fight. You're talking about the motorcycle fight on the bridge?
I'm actually talking about the whole first half of the film.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Let me go to the motorcycle.
Right,
this is my negative here.
Okay, good.
The motorcycle fight on the bridge instantly took me out of the film because of the poor CG.
Yeah.
Right,
it's so readable as CG.
Yep, I'm like, man, this movie, this is the worst thing in this movie. I would have preferred a Mission Impossible style bike chase versus a John Wick style let's fight with swords on the back of motorcycles, which sounds super cool, but I don't think anybody can actually do that. It's one thing to have gunshots shooting at each other, but when you're like hand-to-hand combat on a motorcycle, I'm like, how do you even hold that thing up? So just the realism of that took me out, but then the CG on top of that really just kind of knocked it out. I could see the blur, I could see where they keyed out the green screen or the blue screen. It just didn't feel, it didn't feel like the weight was right either. It didn't feel like they were actually riding their bikes. So that just immediately took me out of the film. So I wish they didn't use that sequence. That whole scene could be cut from the film, probably, in my opinion, and it would have been
no problem.
Fine, yeah.
So, I mean, I thought the horse stuff was great.
Yes.
I thought it was a lovely, like a really cool moment. But that the other bike chase certainly really did collapse. What I was going to talk about is the whole opening of the film. I was torn, right? So I'm enjoying myself, and the action is great. Yeah. And it reminding me of this movie called The Warriors, this Walter Hill film, where this gang has to escape its way back home through New York.
Yeah.
And the problem is that comparison means that the John Wick villains are too cookie cutter. Mm-hmm. And in Warriors, they're very specific, weird, interesting beings. And it didn't matter who he encountered because they weren't unique.
Right.
That's why the knife fight works so well. It's not about who he's fighting. It's about what he's fighting with.
Right.
And as long as that's where your head goes. But my head had done this flip into, there's this reminds me of, and I'm like, oh, it's not doing that. Oh, but it's doing this. And I'll take that and run with it.
Yeah, the villains really separate themselves into, like, their personalities based on their fighting style. And naturally you see some of the more Asian guys fight with knives and samurai swords and just random things that are of their culture. You see all the white guys fighting with guns and motorcycles and cars and random things like that. So, was there another distinct weapon? There was really no distinct. It was really knives and guns, right?
It's really knives and guns. Some really interesting knives, but knives and guns, and fists. I mean, there was so much good.
Anything that can be
fist fight.
Okay, there was one distinct weapon, and that's a horse.
Oh no!
Yeah. That kick, he like chops the horse on the side and it kicks him. Pretty much the most interesting kill I've seen probably in a film in the last couple of years.
Well, I love that they sort of do it twice. So if
you
didn't
knew it was
quite
coming,
get it all, you really got to watch.
Yeah, you expected. You're like, is he going to do it again? And he does it again for sure. The one word in this movie that kept coming up was consequences.
Absolutely.
And we're at kind of a culmination. I feel like we are closing one door, moving into the next with John Wick 4, potentially 5 and 6. I don't know what they're going to do. But consequences, everything leading up to this moment has been about the consequences for John Wick's life. The consequences of his wife dying, but even before that, the consequences of him leaving this world that he's in, the consequences of going after Alfie Allen's character after he killed his dog. Everything leading up to this moment, the consequences of him meeting the guy above the high table and going back. Like, what are the consequences? And that was the theme of the movie, in my opinion. Obviously, they said the word probably like, it must have been like 9-10 times
Easily.
in this film. Literally just repeating it, consequences.
Yeah.
And then she'd say back, consequence. Yeah. And it just happened. And that felt like lazy writing to me a little bit because it was just so on the nose.
Yeah, there's not enough dialogue, though, necessarily to call it lazy writing.
Yeah,
like, one of the
true.
problems is that so little dialogue that I think it might be lazy writing by virtue of the fact that there's no dialogue to speak of.
I would love to count how many words Keanu said in the film. He ends the film with the word "yeah."
No, yeah, that was a.
That's as Keanu as it gets.
Right, dropping the bomb at the end of this film, going to a sequel with the words "yeah."
Yeah.
Is a pretty tough way to get out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, good Lord.
I'm in agreement. Yeah.
I don't even know his name in the film. Morpheus's character, Lawrence Fishburne's character, and seeing him
the king,
in
right?
The king,
the Bowery,
right? Yeah, and I love his character. You know what I would love to see? I would love to see this culture about 30 years before this happened, because I think Winston's character is fascinating. The king of Bowery is fascinating to me. Those are really the two keys. Within New York,
know that worldwide there's other people who are doing
players.
The same thing, right? Because Halle Berry's character is the successor to someone who had started something in Casablanca.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be interesting to see sort of the foundation, and I can imagine that at some point there'll be the prequel film.
Right. If we're thinking about it, they're thinking about it.
Absolutely.
100%. But yeah, they've set up a culture which is very strange to do for an action film. That is pretty much just like boom, boom, like bang, bang,
violence.
Action throughout the entire thing. The fact that they set up a culture in the first place and thought about it. And there's a stunt guy who's directing this film and created the characters and the story. So the fact that he's, pushed, hey, let's create a culture behind all this. And maybe it is because he's a stuntman that he wants that to happen. I'm sure there's a culture within 8711's production house, right?
Absolutely.
Of all the stunt guys. There's this culture within the group that is like nothing else on the planet. So I don't know. Hats off to him for just, being incredible as far as stunt choreography goes, but then taking that to the screen and directing that in a very, I'd say tangible way for us to understand the action without feeling a little bit overwhelmed by it. The pacing was really great, I thought. As far as the action went, they knew when to stop the guns and when to start the hand-to-hand combat, and when to stop the hand-to-hand and go back to guns, and then when to take a break. At any point, did it feel slow to you in the movie?
Well, we get to that section where he has to go on his search.
Right.
And it did not actually feel slow, although I will say that it felt out of the pace of the film. There was a thing happening there that I don't think necessarily the film manifested as it needed to.
Yeah.
That search for his past, they needed to do it quickly. And as a result, we didn't get time to see him suffer. Right. And the discovery of his body and bringing him to the next place didn't feel elevated in a way that some of the other moments have felt elevated. That was a weird business. And as a result, I felt the dip there. Once Halle Berry's character disappeared with those dogs, and he continued to walk with a bottle of her backwash for a while, apparently, I was like, what are we doing here?
I'm just glad we didn't see him drink it.
No, I agreed. But I have to say, it didn't stop being beautiful.
Right.
The lighting, the cinematography, all of that stuff in the desert was absolutely beautiful. Right. It's just, it didn't feel like we were going anywhere,
that's the thing. It felt like a lot to get to the only thing he was trying to do, and that was to meet the guy two steps above Halle Berry's character, right? Not Bron, but the guy above that. I don't know Bron's real name in the movie, but it doesn't really matter. He's the guy who makes the coins.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just felt like it took a while, and that was kind of his fall back into Baba Yaga. Like he fell into like this dark place. You even saw it. He changed his white shirt from white to all black.
Yeah, exactly.
So that costume choice was very, very key for him in that moment. There was something else. I don't remember what it was. We're gonna run out of time in a minute.
We are. Let's just say there were some places where this movie dipped.
Yes.
But the action sequences, like, for this first experience, like, nail it every single time.
I will 100% buy this movie because I really want to see the behind the scenes. I need to know what they're doing behind the scenes in this film.
Well, and it's infinitely watchable because it's, and some words I wanted to use, from a writing standpoint, it's completely episodic without being episodic at all. Oh my, I guess that means we're out of time. So as I say, it was episodic without being episodic.
Yes.
There's all these little pieces, but it's just one flow from beginning to end.
You could watch this movie stand alone and it'd be entertaining as hell, right? They really just pick up where it left off in the second movie, but you could watch from front to back if you understand, like, John's being hunted for $14 million. That's all you need to know. There is a culture behind it. You'd probably want to watch the first two movies after you see this film, but you could totally do that, right? Is that pretty much what you're saying?
Yeah, and as marathon films go, you can watch all three of these in a row. They literally take place over, days.
It's gotta be a week, right?
It's just one straight run of time, each movie moving into the next, which is a really interesting structure, something we don't see, right? You think, like, are they going to start out slow? Oh, no, they're not. They're simply going to go from where we left off, with Keanu running.
Minutes have passed.
Yeah, and he doesn't run that well in that opening sequence, I have to say.
He has a wound in his side.
It was a floppy kind of run. I don't know what you want to say about that. Any final thoughts? Last things you want to say? Things that really made it, like, really stuck out. Just hit it.
Oh, not that I can think of, other than I love the lighting. Loved the Jason Bourne style fighting, but not with the shaky cam. You get the wide shots of.
You get to watch the actual choreography.
I didn't feel sick watching it. It wasn't jittery and jarring. It was really nice to watch.
And I love the use of depth, and I love the use of color, as strange the color may be, and
sort of
non-realistic color, but still super cool.
The neon's really hot right now, so I'd give it, as far as action movie goes, like a 7-8 out of 10, somewhere in that range. I really like the movie. The other films I really like too, but this one I think I've liked the most out of the bunch, in a way.
That's interesting.
I need to see them all straight through, and it's only been minutes since we've watched this movie. So.
Exactly. So we'll have a couple of days to take a break. So we're going to take a break and go a couple of days, talk to some people, go onto Twitter. If you have things you want to say, we always say, if you know what movie we're seeing, tweet us about it. Tweet us your thoughts so we can comment on that. And we'll be back in just a couple of days to talk again.
Yep, sounds good.
Doc, 5 seconds.
John Wick, excommunicado in effect in 3,
2,
1.
And away we go.
So we're back here. It's 2 days after we saw actually maybe 3 days after we saw John Wick 3. So 3 and 3 works real well together. I'm John Doyle.
Josiah Blizzard.
And we're back to rack our focus to a little farther off from the film and talk about some of the things we learned in the interim and some of our thoughts about how the film is in retrospect. That was horrible. It's really horrible.
It's good enough for this, I think. All right, all good.
Okay.
You have much more interesting thoughts on this than I do. I had so since we watched it Thursday night, I've photographed 2 weddings and have had zero time to even research anything until today. So all I found was like a brief article from the director, which I wanted to bring up just a little bit. And let me see if I can pull that up here. Yes, Chad Stahelski, if I'm saying that right.
Someone will correct us in
Twitter.
Yeah,
exactly. Someone will crucify us online, that's what I deserve maybe for mispronouncing his name. But so he reveals the inspiration behind the 4 best fight scenes. The 4 best, because there's clearly more than 4 in this movie. And that's something you said, that there was much more action, right, in this movie than in the previous movies. Did you want to talk about that a little bit before we jump in?
Just real quick, yeah. So I went and watched Hunk again. So instead of watching 1 and 2 before, I watched 1 and 2 after. And one of the things I noticed was the pacing was far slower, right? So,
yes, yeah.
From there's all that setup time in the first film. There's all this thoughtful Keanu Reeves pouting in the first film. Doesn't preclude the action, and the action is also more broken apart. There's more gap time between it, and so you feel the pacing is really different. It's also interesting to me that we have more story in the previous 2 films. Yeah.
This one is certainly more of it felt like a little bit more of a history of, and we talked about the culture previously. It felt like, let's just introduce a little more culture in John Wick 3 and the history behind the high table and all of that. Whereas didn't feel like a character piece on John Wick in this movie, whereas the previous two, you kind of got who he was. Although I will say that this movie did have him sink back into, this is John Wick. This is the John Wick everybody's talked about since the first movie, the Baba Yaga. This is who he is, especially once he gets that knife into the eye. You're like, oh, this is gonna be a brutal movie. And that's when he sinks back in, I think, into that legend of old that they've been. John Wick.
In the first film, we see a lot less of this sort of dynamic color, like the picture we have here, where there's just color everywhere. And
yeah.
I mean, I can't applaud enough the cinematography in this film.
Incredible. Yeah.
And what happens? It's what's fascinating to me is, it's a movie that isn't. The story isn't important, right?
Right.
It's not wise. It's not telling us something important.
Yeah.
It's just it's like an amusement park ride.
The camera doesn't aid the emotion of the scenes.
Well, and potentially because the emotion of the scenes is insignificant and unimportant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's not like we talked about in Endgame, the shaky cam when Jeremy Renner. And if you haven't seen Endgame, don't listen. When he loses his family, we get a shaky cam feeling, right? Of it's chaos. And this, it's just smooth motion all the way through, wide angle shots. It's only there to serve the fighting and the choreography, I think, rather than any emotion that John is feeling.
One of the reviews I read on Twitter, and I'm not going to know who wrote it because I read a lot of stuff over the past couple of days, and that's probably bad to do. But one of the things I read was, if you stop thinking about this movie as a story and think of it as a ballet, like instead of a stage drama, think about it as a 92-hour and 10-minute dance.
Right.
It really becomes something quite different. It's a violent dance, but it's gorgeous in that. And that's, I think, a legitimate thing for it to be.
Yes, I agree with all of that. It is really a dance, choreographed to the point that it doesn't feel choreographed. So I want to talk about this a little bit here. So he talks about the 4 best fight scenes, and these are the stable scene, the horse stable, the antique store, both in the very beginning of the film.
Yeah, first 25 minutes?
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between this movie and the previous 2 movies, right? This one jumps right in. There's no this is what happened before. John Wick 2, there's a little recap of you could watch John Wick 2 without seeing the first John Wick,
right? Even though it totally starts with the car that ends the first movie, there's a gap of recollection,
right? Yeah, they give a little info dump on it. In case you haven't seen movie 1. And someone drags you to this film and you haven't seen it, you're going to be fine for the next 2 hours. This just jumps straight into the action. You're going to be completely lost if you haven't seen the first 2 movies. That action starts out pretty strong, and then it goes into the dog shootout.
Right.
And then the assault on the Continental, obviously. So as far as this goes, though, he really is just, and this is the one thing that stuck out to me in the antique store. Chad Stahelski says, the antique gun thing is a direct ode to the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay.
Eli Wallach putting the gun together. I'm a huge, massive Sergio Leone fan, so that's a direct link to that. As far as antique shops go, I love antique shops. I love museums. Spent a lot of time here going through old antique stores, and we always said, what's your big set piece? Well, John Wick's going to walk in and find this old gun set piece, right? So that's a direct nod to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I haven't seen in such a long time. You're a fan of that movie?
I'm a fan of all Leone's movies, and especially which means I'm a fan of Kurosawa, since he, for most case, ripped off Kurosawa films and just made them
Western
Americanized
style,
or Western style. But that doesn't belittle the filmmaking.
Yeah,
and same thing here, right? So, John Wick is taking, I talked to you about the Raid Redemption, but it's also taking movies like Bullet in the Head and Hard Boiled and The Killer, all these Hong Kong action films. They're all flavored in the film, and there's nothing wrong with that, because the filmmaking work is what makes the difference. Right,
and I think the antique scene was one of my favorite fight scenes. I think we talked about the knife fight being just incredible, and Chad talks about, when the hero in the movie throws a knife, it's always sticking straight on. And in this movie, they're just, he called it a knife snowball fight, because they are just throwing knives at each other. And you can tell some are bouncing off, not sticking, others are. And it leaves you, and he said it leaves the audience saying, "Oh my God!" And I remember sitting in the theater watching this, saying, "Oh my God, I cannot believe I'm watching them just chuck knives at each other." And it was a nice piece of realistic filmmaking, because that's what would happen. He asked knife experts, like, how often do you get get the knife to stick? And he said, like 3 out of 10 times, or something like 7 out of 10 they're missing. 3 out of 10 times they're gonna get it to stick. And that's pretty much what happened in this film. It was only every so often they actually got the knife to stick in, based on distance and throwing accuracy and speed and all that stuff.
Well, and the kind of knife, whatever. They're throwing every imaginable knife.
Yeah.
And that's
just insane. So I think that was definitely one of my favorite scenes. But even talking about the horse stable scene, there are horse stables in the middle of New York, because you have the horse and buggies, carriages taking people around. And so John goes into the stable and like, well, how can we kill somebody in a horse stable? And someone said, the horses kick. And Chad was a stunt man. Before he started directing, he said he was kicked by a horse once, and he said he couldn't use his arm for a week. So he said, death by horse, that's definitely what we're going to do. So they were already, based on what I was reading, plotting out deaths, cool deaths, unique deaths, before even writing the story. So the deaths and their locations were going to kind of lay the foundation for the writing and where they were going with that.
Yeah, and that's why we know it's not like the story isn't. There's no story to this, really.
Right.
But doesn't need to be, because just as in a ballet, it can such a simple tale gets expanded because of the movement and the piece. Yeah, what you're talking about reminds me of Kurosawa and in Hidden Fortress, where he would shoot all day, and at the end of the day, he would shoot his characters into a corner. Then he'd turn to the writers and say, "You got to find an interesting way out. I'll see you tomorrow morning." And they'd show up the next morning, and there'd be a solution to the problem, and they would start shooting again. And that's the inspiration for Star Wars, which ends up having cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger. Yeah. And this movie uses, instead of creating cliffhangers that are resolved, it's find set pieces and they problem solve their way out of it. Yeah. And that it's so exciting.
I think that's something that a good storyteller will do, right? Every positive thing that happens, every time there's a win for the main character, there is an equal or opposite reaction that sends them into a conflict. I think Spielberg does that pretty well. I think Indiana Jones is a good example of that. Just pretty often, Indiana Jones finds himself in a win, and then all of a sudden it takes a turn, and it's something he has to get out of. So, yes, let's continue with John Wick. What else did you want to talk about? That was really the biggest interest from that article I found, was that Good, the Bad, the Ugly thing. Everything else it's just a lot of shooting guns.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me, right, is there's less shooting in the film. We talked about that before. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about Angelica Houston and the ballet training center. Yeah. Where we see where John Wick got trained, right? This idea of training. We get this ethnic history, which I think was pretty interesting.
Yeah. What is his ethnicity? Where is he from? Is he, because his name was...
so it's got to be Eastern European. And someone, again, on Twitter knows exactly the answer to that, which we don't. But, it's some Eastern European nationality. Yeah. But that sequence was really interesting to me. Again, ballet, right? Like we're seeing ballet, and there's some parallel being made to the dance of violence, to the dance. And at moment when, the building is overtaken, and we have assassins walking right through the dancers who don't break a beat.
Yeah, they keep going.
They keep going. The dance finishes, and then the consequence happens, right? Yeah. And those consequences in the movie, and you talked about this before, all seem to be very physical consequences, right? No one's experiencing an emotional disarray. Right. There's some, you chop off your finger, or you get 7 cuts, right? Or you get a blade through your hands in supplication, whatever it may be. Those actions are the consequence of the film. These people aren't being altered spiritually. Yeah. They're being altered physically, because that's what the movie is. Yeah. But I love that sequence. I thought, for a couple of reasons. One, the cinematographer, the DP, these guys are out there, and we're seeing color used on a stage. Yeah. In a way telling us, hey, this is a movie full of color. And stage, like we are on a stage. This is a story you're watching. Yeah, I love that parallel. I thought it was really interesting.
Excuse me. Back to the physicality of their atonement in a way was we're gonna thrust a machete through your hands, or a katana or whatever the heck he was using. There's a hierarchy, right? And I think the hierarchy is based on who is dishing out that pain. Because I took it as obviously this ballet and this wrestling, those two trainings, obviously one is all male dominated and the other one is female dominated. I think there was one or two males on the ballet stage. I can't quite remember. But it's a discipline that, the wrestlers are training. Wrestling is a discipline. Ballet, definitely a discipline. They're training for whatever. I just took it as they are all assassins in training, right, under this school. And we see a girl rip her toenail off, and we see another girl with bruises all over her legs. And there's the first girl dancing, where she's dancing all alone on the stage. She keeps falling, and she keeps having to get back up. And that's exactly what John Wick does the entire 3 movies, right? He keeps falling, getting hurt, getting right back up, and fighting. He does it near the end of the film, completely mirroring the ballet dancer in the beginning.
Absolutely.
But the mother of that school is dishing out the pain to the wrestlers, to the ballet dancers, and saying you have to keep getting up. Doesn't matter if it hurts, you have to keep getting up, keep getting up, keep getting up. Don't stay down. If you stay down, you're dead. You're done. And it's the same with the high table, dishing out that pain to her. Like, you're under our authority, just as your students are under your authority, and we have the power to discipline you. And if you keep doing what you're going to do and what you've been doing with John Wick, then you're going to stay down and you're not getting back up. Same thing with the King of the Bowery, right? They were just like, no, you're done. Like, you're not gonna atone. You're not gonna repent from your ways of helping John Wick. Then we're just gonna kill you, and that's it. And obviously, he didn't die, and he's returning to seek vengeance in the 4th film, hopefully,
with the most scarring of any actor we're gonna have. He's gonna be a long time in makeup for the next film.
But yes, I love the physicality of the it's just dishing out pain, and that's how the hierarchy is made. Even the top dog, right, in the desert, he didn't cause any pain physically himself, but he's forcing John to cut off his fingers, and not even just physical pain, but emotional pain of his wedding ring, his you have to cut that tie. You have to cut that tie.
Return back and kill Winston.
So he's still dishing out pain, just in a different way.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how much that ballet thing has stuck with me in this parallel, and the fact that something beautiful, and like it's a parallel for the film. This thing is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It is all violence. It's also not real. And one of the great slams people have against films like this, this movie is not an important film in the canon of filmmaking.
Right.
But it is an important film in the art of filmmaking. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it has to be real. No one can really do what he did. There's a boxing scene. There's no way you can go that long. Boxing is too exhausting. You can't make it when you're fighting fisticuffs like that.
Right.
You can't be smashed into so much glass and get back up.
No, yeah.
But ballet's the same. It's a long dance. It's not real. People aren't swans.
Right.
And yet when we watch it, we experience something, and it's a journey, and this journey is fun. Like, it's a ride.
Yeah, you're buying into the story that is set before you. So we haven't brought up Jason Mantzoukas at all.
Yeah, okay, good.
And
he'll lead into something I want to say.
Okay,
so that's
great.
Perfect.
Who is wonderful. I didn't know he was in the movie. Did you know he was going to appear?
I did not know he was going to appear. I didn't even think about it. He may well be in 2. I would assume he's in 2.
I don't remember him in...
but I don't remember.
The second one, because it was surprising to me when I saw him on screen. He might have been in 2, but I think it was a different homeless guy.
His voice is so good.
Yeah. I wish he had a larger role, although he was warning and a guide in a way to John.
Well, and he's still alive.
And he's still alive. Yeah, they didn't show his death on screen. I was afraid we were going to get a close-up of Jason Mantzoukas getting his throat slit. And he's clearly alive. He carries John away in the cart and brings him to King of the Bowery. At the end, we got to find out his real name. I don't know if... Maybe we'll just call him the King. It's fine, whatever. So I hope he has a little bit of a larger role if he is in the next film, because I would like to see him get that credit a little bit more.
And it's a perfect role, right? It's got that raggedy sort of...
Yeah, it's the beard.
Homeless guy, bearded guy, madman.
Right.
That is so good that he does. And he's a great character actor.
Yeah. No, he's really great.
And funny as
he's hilarious. So it was like Adrian Pimento's in John Wick 3. This is awesome. Great. And Anything else you want to talk about specifically?
So I just want to talk about, I'm going to say makeup, but it's really design. So like we have a picture of John Wick to our left. In honor of John Wick, I have not shaved my neck or trimmed my beard at all since we've seen the movie because it is just, he is a mess. And I want to say that in the first film, that's not the case, right?
It's pretty clean shaven. For the most part, it's edged, right?
The beard is clean, the edges are good. And this movie's happened over a period of time that may not account for all of the violence his beard has taken on. But the beard, there is a thing about decay here that's on him. And those makeup choices, we see wounds, those wounds stay. I thought the makeup work on King of the Bowery was lovely. Like it's believable and horrible all at once.
Right.
But the beard stuff just got me, and it made me look at the rest of that. And there's great work being done by all of the technicians in this film.
Yeah.
So
the attention to detail is really stunning in this movie.
Yeah, for a movie that literally some of the details are going to flash by you because they're simply the target of a bullet or where a head's getting smashed.
Yeah. Like we mentioned before, the chandelier shop that they run through for, I don't know, it was on screen for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. That probably took forever to set dress. So yeah, the attention to detail is insane, and the whole beard.
Yeah, the
whole beard, just being like him falling into ruin a little bit. His not getting lazy, because I like a lot of people think beards are, you're just lazy or you're dirty or grungy, and he is getting a little bit grungy, and maybe we'll see him fit in with some homeless people a little bit better in the next thing. That might be him becoming part of the king's grouping of people,
right, in order to turn around and go back and do the real work.
Right, because every single person I think we saw in that homeless area had some kind of beard. I don't know if that's him going to be fitting in with them, and he's just not going to shave at all, and he'll have a beard down to here in the next film. But as long as he shaves his neck, I will be happy, because it was a little bit. It was
a lot. It really. There's a point I said, this man is having a rough day. And talk about symbolic language. That scraggly neck beard is a mess.
Yeah, we got to get Chris Evans in here to show him how to shave.
Absolutely.
He needs to go watch Endgame. Other than that, I don't really have.
I think we can probably wrap this up. I would. I didn't get the rate last time, so after 2 days, do you want to change your rating, and I'll quickly do that too.
Yeah, so I like it less now that I've thought about it a little bit more. I still love the opening sequence, all the action. Love the dog shootout. I cannot imagine how hard it was to block that dog shootout scene, and how I can't imagine they used much CGI in there either. For all the dogs seemed real.
And crotch oriented. I mean, it's
very
horrible.
crotch oriented.
It's what a horror.
Yeah, I don't know how you shoot that. You put guys in cups and have squibs underneath.
All I know is that anyone who calls this movie just like a male-dominated film, those men were persecuted in the way that the Me Too movement needs them to be persecuted. So I'm really comfortable with those assaults.
But the action was extraordinary. So for action's sake, I give it like a 10 out of 10 for action. For a movie overall, I'd probably stick with around a 7, low 7. But and you said it's not a important film as far as canon goes in filmmaking. I think the action is important, because I think this is going to set the standard in the same way that The Matrix sets standards for action films. This is going to do something similar. This whole trilogy, people are going to strive to be like John Wick as far as action goes. We're going to stop seeing Jason Bourne style cuts, and we've already seen that kind of dissolve. But because of this movie and because of the previous films, we're going to see many, many more actors training like stuntmen rather than getting stunt doubles, I think.
Yeah, you say The Matrix, and this feels like the second Matrix film. Mm-hmm. I mean, which I don't necessarily think is a great movie. Right. I think this is a far better film, but it's doing the same job, right? It's just bridging between one thing to another. The plot's really thin. It's mostly about movement and action. That's a short film. This is a longer film, but it feels like that. It has that same sort of linking sense where we're going to see another movie that may be anchored a little more strongly. For sure. So from my standpoint, I'm almost the same as you. I think it's really one of the best action films we have. It's extraordinary, and I'm a huge fan of the Hong Kong action films.
Yeah,
and it sits right up there with them. What I would say is it lacks a heart, it lacks mind in some ways, and that kicks it down. So as a film overall, 7 I think is like a legitimate standpoint. But
fair, right? Yeah.
The problem we're having with these movies, and I think we're going to have it straight across the board, is when we go to rate, genre films demand a dual rating. And I think we want to think about that as we move forward, and people should too, that it's not about rating the movie against movies that are doing a different thing.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to say define your dual rating.
Yeah, so like I think there's a rating that matches it to the concept of genre. You know, you can't put, I mean, next thing we're going to see, right, is Godzilla. You can't put Godzilla next to the movie Philadelphia or Castaway.
Right.
They don't function the same at all. And so when we look at genre, we may need to look at words like spectacle having meaning to it, as well as character and whatever. As a film, this struggles with character.
Right.
But as spectacle goes, as adventure goes,
an
as
action
action
film,
goes, as a ballet, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened when we watched Endgame.
Yeah.
It is. I said to you, like, it's the best comic book movie I've ever seen.
Right.
But it may not be the best superhero movie.
Right.
And so when I think about that, I'd like to rate the movie overall.
No, it's good.
And then within its genre.
I think we got to look at it in multiple ways, multiple viewpoints.
Which we're doing by our nature, and I like that. And so I just wanted to formalize it.
No, I love that. That's great. We're going to run out of time.
Okay, good.
I think that's good.
So if we're out of time, do we have time to do the goodbye?
Yeah. Oh, you know what?
What?
We have time to do the goodbye, but give me a 1 minute. How does The Raid compare to this film?
That's great. The Raid for me is a far more heartbreaking film. I think that all of the Asian cinema that this is drawing from, and like we have to at least be jaded a little bit and know that the Asian market is huge. The Chinese market is gigantic. And a lot of these movies we're seeing today with a lot of Asian faces in it is about selling, making money in the worldwide market. Those movies have so much more heart than our American action films do.
Yeah.
It's the difference in the way gunplay is done. A gun in the United States is a distance weapon. A samurai sword is about honor and connection. It's about a single thrust. There's a different thing happening. But the ballet is very similar. The Raid is spectacular. You talked when we watched the one scene from it that it's full of shaky cam, and that's something you don't like that much, especially in fights.
Yeah.
I think this is a far more beautiful film.
Right.
I think The Raid may have, as an origin of this,
we're out of time, but keep going.
As an origin piece, it may be a stronger origin movie.
Great.
But I'll take The Killer or Bullet in the Head or Hard Boiled over all of them, to be honest.
Great.
So,
cool. No, that's good.
there you go.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching this latest episode of the Racking Focus podcast. We would love for you guys to support us on Patreon. You can find that link in the description below, whether you're on YouTube or you're on podcasts app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. You can find that link there. We'd love for your support.
You can also email us at rackingfocuspod@gmail.com, or you can get us on Twitter at podfocus. There's lots of ways to communicate. We want your communication, so we have things to talk about aside just the two of us talking to each other. Next up, what do we have? What are we going to next?
We are watching Godzilla.
Well, that's Gamera. And
this
so
is
now you're
Gamera.
in trouble.
See, this is where I did not watch any Godzilla films, so I'm going to go in as a complete novice.
And there's 1,000 people who just aimed an arrow at your head.
That's fine. I'm totally fine with that.
I put Gamera there because I'm a big Gamera fan. I cheated the Godzilla out of it. Yeah, we're going to see Godzilla. And what else are we seeing? We're doing double duty.
We're Rocket Man as well. Rocket Man next week, too. So there's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so we have 2 films, so we hope you're back for those. If you haven't listened to our Endgame episode or our Game of Thrones episode, go back and check those out. And we thank you for listening or watching.
Awesome. See you later. Thanks for listening to the Racking Focus podcast.